Hello, chess friends, and welcome to Jozarov chess channel, and welcome to the TCEC Season 17 superfinal between the two top engines, Leela C Zero and Stockfish. So, after many rounds, the result is equalized. We'll still have a tough battle for the throne of this very nice TCEC Season 17. And yesterday, I've covered also a game from this CCC Season 13, again between Leela C Zero and Stockfish. And Stockfish really crushed in that game, Leela C Zero, but it came out, the win came out from a irregular opening. I've explained it in that video. So here in this video we'll have really a regular opening. We'll have the Benoni Defense. The Benoni Defense has its advantages, has also its disadvantages, but I just wanted to point you out that Leela C Zero plays really great positional chance when we come to regular openings. So of course maybe Stockfish is a little bit tactically more prepared, but from this positional point of view I think Leela has a better positional understanding, and that's why I still think that Leela C Zero will win both of this very nice finals. So let's check out the game. So d4 was played by Leela C Zero. Stockfish played the move knight to f6. We have c4. After c5 we have the Benoni Defense, and after the move d5, e6, still common theory. Knight to c3. Here e takes d5. After c takes d5, now d6. And what I really liked immediately is this move knight to f3, which was prearranged. Of course, this had to be played in the game, but I wanted to show you really how more flexible this move is than to go maybe into this common e4 ideas. Let's see a normal continuation in the Benoni. After something like bishop to g7, white will proceed maybe with the move knight to f3, bishop to g7. After something like bishop to e2, black would probably castle, white will also castle, and now comes a very tricky move, immediately a6. After the move a4, which is a necessary move, then black has the opportunity to create sort of a positional pin here. After the move h3, bishop takes f3, would be black's continuation, getting rid of the knight. And now after bishop takes f3, there is this positional problem of this like square bishop. You see, it's blocked out by its own pawn. We have a very nice central square for black. Black would try to create sort of a blocking system with the move knight to d7, then maybe knight to e5. And the main idea for white here is to make some kind of a progress with some f4 e5 moves, but it will be really hard for white to get through with this plan. Still, white is slightly better here. It's not a problem that white will lose the game because we have a bad bishop here, but I still like this move knight to f3. You see how Leela C Zero will get out of this opening preparations very well. So here after move g6, we have now the opportunity to play the move knight to d2. This knight to d2 is a common move anyway in the Benoni Defense as from white's perspective, and you wouldn't play anyway if your opponent wouldn't pin you, for instance here. So Leela C Zero played really a different move, or just to get this knight on c4, and now after potential e4, no pinning ideas are possible for black, so we could proceed with our idea to create really a pawn breakthrough here with the move e4, and bishop to g4 doesn't work anymore as it can be met with potential f3 moves. So you see, I'm pointing you this particular line out because I want you to pay good attention how bad this like square bishop of blacks will be in the continuation of the game, because it will be really blocked out. That's why I really liked this move knight to d2, although it was prearranged. After the move bishop to g7, now comes the move e4. No bishop to g4 ideas are happening anymore in the game. Castling played by Stockfish, and now bishop to e2. Here knight from b to d7, and now h3. Let's stop for a little bit here. We want to evaluate our strength. We want to also see where our disadvantages are. Here white has of course a better activity because after potential knight to c4, the position would be really good, I think, for white. But how to continue here? Here is the main advantage of white. We have this pawn majority here on the king side, so it means we have 4 versus 3 situation. So that's the side we should try to push. In order to make that happen, this h3 is really a necessary move because we want to proceed here with the move f4. This f4 move would really paralyze this knight as it cannot jump on this very active square on e5. And if you wouldn't, for instance, play this move h3, let's, for instance, try immediately to push the pawn on f4. That's the problem, because there are some possibilities for black, if the position allows it, to jump here on this g4 square. So if that's why this h3, let's see a possible continuation here. Knight to e8 was played. If black, for instance, tries here immediately to play the move knight to e5, then it can be met with f4. You see, you cannot jump with the knight on g4, so again this knight would be kicked away, and here white has a very, very powerful center, so white has the advantage in space. So that's why this h3, very nice prophylactic move. In the game, this idea knight to e5 wasn't played by black. In the game, Stockfish proceeded with the move knight to e8. In the game, castling played by Leela C Zero, and now a6. a4, as I said, a necessary move, as it prevents this b5 ideas. And in the game, finally, after rook to b8, we have the move knight to c4. You see, this would be played anyway by Leela C Zero. As I'm pointing out this very nice maneuver, knight to d2, knight to c4, without these threats to get pinned. And here queen to e7 was played by Stockfish. I also analyzed this move b5. If you try to make progress in an early stage of the game, it seems really like a dangerous move, but it's not a problem, as we can take 8x b5. After 8x b5, now knight to a5 is the best continuation with the fork idea here on c6. So you would be forced to play something like bishop to b7, but then your pawn on b5 is hanging. So if you try maybe something like, I don't know, queen to b8, b6, then knight to c6 with an attack on the rook, here is the problem. After something like rook to b7, you lose the piece immediately, as you get this very annoying check. Knight to e7, king goes to h8, and now knight to c6, and you lost the piece. So tricky stuff already. You see, queen to e7. It really seemed that for me that this b5 pawn breakthrough is really a possibility, but it's not so, because here we had some really great tactics prepared by Leela C Zero. In the game now, finally f4 was played, and there is now this tricky choice for white, what to do. If we want to, this e4 is the main target of blacks. Black will try to play something like bishop to c3, and then maybe take out this pawn. This is the main tactic that black has prepared here. But still, if you give up your dark square bishop in an early stage of the game, then you're continuing the game with these weaknesses around black's king, so it wouldn't be a good idea. Here you can choose. If you want to play the move f4, then we want to have the rook, of course, behind this pawn. But still, it's okay if we even try to cement our position around this e4 pawn, because bishop takes c3 is not a possibility. So far, you see the problems about this move. Let's see, b takes c3 after something like, I don't know, a queen takes e4. Then the problem is you get this very, very annoying move bishop to h6. You see the problems on dark squares. If you cover here with the move knight to g7, then you get knight to d6. And I can guarantee you one thing: if you lose in the Benoni, the d6 pawn, you will get crushed. That's the problem. Here in this position, you could try maybe, I don't know, some knight to e5 ideas. Maybe try to attack this knight, but still, we can simply, I think, take the rook. That's the main problem in the game. Here, rook to e1 wasn't played, but I just wanted to show you how problematic it can be for black if black goes after this move, after this pawn e4. In the game, Leela C Zero didn't proceed with the move rook to e1. Here Leela played this immediate f4 move, trying to really grab some space. In the game, bishop to d4 attacking the king, king to h2, and now knight to f6 was played. If you again try here to take the pawn, you saw the problems. Again, the same idea after queen to e4. Let's see a possible continuation here after b takes c3, queen takes e4. Then I think f5 is a great move here for white. We're cracking the position immediately, and the problem is black has again to close the dark square somehow. If you try knight to e5, that would be really suicide, because you get rook to f4 and your queen is trapped, so it wouldn't be a possibility. You cannot basically close the dark squares. If you try again this knight to f6, move to get some kind of protection. Then again, bishop to h6, you saw the problems. If you cover with the knight, then your d6 pawn is hanging. So these are really some tricky stuff, or tricky things already. Here after the move king to h2, knight to f6 was played, bishop to f3, and finally Stockfish decides to give up the dark square bishop for this pawn, which is basically a bad choice, but I'm not seeing a better way anyway for Stockfish. After b takes c3, knight takes e4 was played, and now queen to e1. It's of course a pinning idea which has to be met by the move f5, but you don't want, of course, to play something like here rook to e1, then f5. But the more important thing is that you cannot play actively with your queen because you have to protect your c3 pawn. That's the main weakness in white's position now. So that's why I like this idea, queen to e1, protecting our c3 pawn with the preparation to improve the position of the pawn, maybe with some c4 moves. So f5 anyway, played by Stockfish, and now knight to b6. Here knight to f6 was played, and from the positional point of view, again, this is a really problematic setup by black here, as this knights are, of course, protecting each other. They're good defensive pieces, but they're not good attacking pieces. When you're on the attacking side, you don't want to have this setup in which this knight takes out another square for the knight. So it's really a reloading system, sort of, but I really don't like black's position. This bishop is blocked out. This knights are basically attacking nothing anymore. They're only defensive pieces. And now finally this move c4. Now we can really play freely. Here in the game, bishop to d7 was played by Stockfish. Maybe a better idea is to proceed knight to d7, but I still think that we can play something like rook to b1 after knight takes b6, rook takes b6, and you cannot attack the rook. That's the problem, as you get a5, really cementing the rook. And now our main idea would be probably to play something like bishop to b2, maybe bishop to a1, get the queen somehow here on b2, and creating really some dangerous threats on dark squares here, because you see how bad it was for Stockfish to give up the dark square bishop in an early stage of the game, because black hasn't secured a blockade on dark squares. So we have already this advanced f5 pawn, which we had to play in order to cement our knight. So it's really a problematic position here for black already. After the move c4, bishop to d7 was played, so not this move, knight to d7, and finally rook to a3. The idea is, of course, to play rook to e3 and attacking even further this knight on e4, but still with the main target. This now our main target. Black needs to be careful here, because again the main idea would be something like, I don't know, bishop to b2, bishop to a1, queen to b2, and get rid of this knight somehow, and then creating checkmate threats maybe on g7 or h8. So in the game, h5 played by Stockfish, which is of course a positional move, because we want, when we have the knights on the board, we want to keep the position static. We don't want this position to be dynamic, preventing some g4 pawn breakthroughs, because your knight is a little bit overloaded. So in the game, king to g1 was played, getting out of some potential, maybe a rook to f7, rook to h7 ideas, that then maybe we can play freely this g4 move. In the game, rook to f7 was played, and now rook to e3. We have now the best pieces, our pieces really on the best squares on the board, and basically here Leela C Zero really paralyzed the crap out of Stockfish. Here Stockfish, I'm not sure with which piece should we play. Let's count this pieces: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 13 pieces we have on the board, and none of them can move. This is really a great boa constrictor chess game played by Leela C Zero. Really, the whole position is paralyzed. I'm not seeing a good way how you should play with any piece. Let's see a possible, I don't know, rook to e8. It seems that we are defending at least our e4 pawn. We can simply proceed here with some g4 moves, or we could try our main idea, bishop to b2. I think it's still the best way, with the ideas again, as I said, bishop to a1, get rid somehow maybe of some defensive pieces here, and again creating our battery on dark squares. Again, it would be really deadly here for black. In the game, you see how desperate Stockfish was. In the game, a5 was played by Stockfish, giving up back material just in order to make something happen, just in order to make some kind of a counterplay, maybe try somehow, if the position allows it, go into the game through the a file. But this was really a desperate move. As let's go back to this position. Tell me, with which piece should we play here? It's really a desperate position. Great game, great positional game by Leela C Zero. In the game, as I said, a5 was played, giving up back material just in order to make this pin, queen to d8, but it's a little bit too late. Here the pieces are too active by Leela C Zero. We have also this very important pawn. You see the importance of this pawn in the continuation of the game. Bishop to b2, a natural move. Still, this bishop is really the best minor piece on the board. In the game, h4 was played. The idea behind this move is to create a blocking system. It's a very natural move if we try to create sort of a blockade, because then we cannot push the pawn here on g4, because we can always take with en passant, and the knight is covering that. So far it's on the king side, nothing can happen so far. So that was a Stockfish idea, to create really a blockade here. And in the game, rook to e1, you see how easy it's now for Leela C Zero to find the best next move. Simply improvement of the position. The rook is now on the most active file, and in the game, king to h7 was played. Rook to b3. Now we have a new target. It's of course this b7 pawn. So in the game, queen to f8, and now bishop takes f6. Now when we have our pawn back, it's okay to trade off some more pieces, because we have a better activity. That's the main problem. Knight takes f6 was played. Rook takes f6 doesn't work because you lose the bishop. So the bishop on d7 is hanging, so knight to f6, really a must move. And now queen to d2, with the preparation to double our rooks now on the b file, and also create maybe again some troubles through dark squares. So in the game, queen to g7 was played, a5, very important move, cementing our knight, and also with preparations to play this move a6, because this rook is a little bit pinned here by this rook on b3. So that's why very important to make progress here on the queen side. That's the side that we have most of our activity, so it's okay. King to g8 was played, queen to f2, we have g5, and here knight takes d7, getting rid of this bishop. Although it was a bad bishop, but with this move g5, Stockfish basically showed the cards that we are going into a dynamic game, that the game will become dynamic again with the move g5. So getting the bishop off the board is an okay, as the threat was of course to play even g4. So bishop takes here after the move g5, knight takes d7 was played, and now knight takes d7. If you take rook takes d7, then this move a6, that's the main tactical threat that that Leela C Zero has prepared here. You cannot take, of course, because your rook is hanging. So in the game, you would probably have to play something like b6, but now I still think we can simply take. F takes g5, really undermining this pressure on the king side. After something like queen to g5, queen to b2 is, I think, a winning move, because you cannot protect anymore this pawn. We have everything protected, and the most important thing is that this bishop on f3 restricts also this knight's ability to jump somehow into the game. So here I think again white has a completely winning endgame. So in the game, knight to d7 was played, but still we can play bishop to h5, attacking the rook. The rook is now an object of our attack. In the game, rook to f8 was played. The problem is, if you try, for instance, something like rook to f6, then again we can play a very tricky move, bishop to e8, attacking the knight, as the rook is not protecting the 8th rank anymore. You could try maybe something like g takes f4, but now a simple trade of pieces, I think, again wins the game. After queen to d7, we don't want to take, of course, the f pawn, we want to take the h pawn. That's the more important pawn. These are double pawns, they're weak anyway. And again, in the next move, we can take this pawn, try to maybe regroup a little bit, try to play rook to e3, and then followed with rook to e6. Again, it will be a perfect harmony of this heavy artillery that will be on the board. So In the game, as I said, rook to f8, played by Stockfish, covering the 8th rank, but now simply rook to e6, with the threat, of course, to play rook to g6 and trapping the queen. So that's why knight to f6 was a necessary move, but now simply queen to e2, again having our perfect battery on the e-file, and now queen to h6. If you try here knight to h5, again, it's not a good position because we can simply take, queen takes h5. You have to do something again. Again, we have the same threat, rook to g6, so that's why rook to f6 would be a necessary move. But now simply queen takes g5. I still think it again wins the game. After queen takes g5, f takes g5. Rook to e6 is a possibility, but now d takes e6. We have now two pass pawns. If you try, for instance, to go after this pawn, then we can simply take this pawn, rook to b7. After rook to e6, you cannot prevent any more white from promotion. If you try to cover the 8th rank, then you get a7 followed with rook to b8. You cannot prevent it. If you go here in this position behind the pawn with some rook to e1 ideas, then okay, king to h2. Still, we can, after something like rook to a1, we can play simply a7, and the threat is now to play rook to b8 and followed with a8 promotion. So tricky stuff. You see, after the move queen to e2, again this move knight to h5 doesn't work, so that's why in the game queen to h6 was played, and now bishop to f3, again placing our bishop on this opposite on this preventing idea. So knight on e4 is not a possibility. The knight cannot come into the game actively, but still this knight is pinned to the queen. So here in the game, g4 was played by Stockfish, a tricky idea, but Leela C Zero wasn't scared, of course. H takes g4, f takes g4, bishop takes g4, queen takes f4. The position is now much more simplified. Here, bishop to h3. Still, this bishop has a good diagonal, and you see how weak this e6 square on the board is. Still, the d6 pawn is also a weakness. It's our main target in this position. So the d6, as I said, if we take this d6, the game is over. That's always in the Benoni. At least most of the times I've played many times against the Benoni. When I take out the d6 pawn, it's probably game over for black. So in the game, queen to c1, not a problem. We can simply cover here after trades of queens. Still, white has, of course, a better activity. King to g7 was played, and now rook to b6. If you try to compete here with this rook, here instead of this king to g7, if you try maybe to compete with the rook, I still think we can play this move rook to e6 after trades of after trades of rooks. The most important thing is that this move bishop takes e6 comes with a check, so you have to move the king. And again, this a6, this is the main thematic problem here for black. This move a6, the spinning idea on the b file, is too much to handle. There's too much pressure in the position. Again, black is lost. So in the game, king to g7 was played. Here rook to b6, again targeting our main weakness. As I said, the d6 weakness, rook to d8, and now rook to b1 with the preparation to finally take out also this pawn. In the game, rook to a8, rook takes b7, not a problem, and now rook to a1, protecting our pawn. We don't want to lose material, of course, here. Still, you have to play this endgame very patiently. You cannot just rush into the position. Okay, we have an extra pawn. It's of course not winning immediately. We have to play slowly moves. So in the game, rook to a6, rook to b6, forcing really the trades of the rooks. But Stockfish decides to stay with many pieces on the board. That's also a very important strategy, sometimes defensive strategy. When you're pawn down, you don't want to trade off the pieces so much. You want still to have some counter-attack possibilities. And in the game after a6, we have the move king to g5, rook to f1. Here knight to h5 was played. It seems now that knight to d7. Black would love to play this move, knight to d7, and get this knight on this very active square on e5. But Leela C Zero prevented this move through the whole game, because you cannot do that. Of course, the d6 pawn is hanging, and it's again a lost game. So tricky stuff, tricky endgame here for Stockfish to handle. After the move knight to h5, we have rook to f5 attacking the king, king to g6, and now very cool move, rook to e5. You cannot take, of course, because of this rook here. So that's why here knight to f4 was played. not a problem. King to h2. If you trade off the pieces too early, again, king takes h3 is a possibility. Now, this would be a weakness. Still, you cannot take the rook. And again, our main idea would be rook to e6, taking out also this d6 pawn. So in the game, after the move king to h6 was played, and now rook to f5, attacking the knight. Knight to h5, h5, and now bishop to g4, knight to g3, not a problem. We have again the same tactic possibility here, rook to e5, king to g6, and now bishop to d1. Very important move to get our bishop on this diagonal. This is now an improvement of the position of the piece. Here, rook to f7 was played, and now finally bishop to c2. Now, really, white pieces are on the best squares. Now it's time to grab this weak d6 pawn. Now, finally, rook to e6. Here, king to g5, rook takes d6, rook takes d6, rook takes d6, and now here, rook to a7 was a necessary move, but this is now, again, I'm pointing out, completely winning. Very important move also, this move, bishop to d3, never allow this knight to come into the game. Somehow this knight is also paralyzed. King to f4, rook to e6, restricting really black's ability to play with the pieces. King to g4 here in the game, king to g1, king to g5, we have king to f2. And this is also now a very instructive endgame played by Leela C Zero. When we play some endgames, first what we want to do is to place our pieces on the most active squares, which means it's the rook on e6, the bishop on d3 is perfectly fine. Now the king has to play. Knight to h5, trying to get this knight somehow into the game, but now king to f3, knight to f6, and now king to d3 with the preparation to get into this position here through dark squares, and also here after the move a4, king to b5 would be winning. If white manage to do that, then it's game over for black. So in the game, knight to g4, a check, not a problem. Here after king to f4, bishop to e2 was played, knight to e5, and again the bishop is placed always to restrict this knight's ability to play. Again, this knight cannot come actively into the game. In the game, king to c3 was played. We have rook to g7 attacking the pawn. Bishop to f1, we have king to rook to a7, and now finally this king comes into the game, finally through the square a4, b5, and basically it's game over. But Stockfish tried somehow to defend its position. After king to b5, we have knight to e5, and now finally king takes c5, rook to c8, king to d4, not a problem. Knight to d7, rook to e7 attacking the knight, knight to c5, pushing pawn further. Whatever you do, basically you cannot really lose this game. King to b4, again this king comes very active into the game. Knight to e4 here, very cool move. Now in the end, g3, for instance, if you take h takes g3, then we have simply bishop to g2 attacking against the knight. If knight to d6, then the problem is that this d6, c5 comes with an attack on d6. It comes with a tempo. So again, black has to react, and these two pawns are simply too much to handle. Again, it's a lost endgame. So here after the move g3, you cannot also take with the knight. Again, the same scenario happens. We have some possibilities to play bishop to h3, again attacking the rook. Again, it would be game over. So g3, king to f3 was played here. Finally, g takes h4, rook to a8, not a problem. And now, very cool move, bishop to g2, deflecting the king from the defense of the knight. Rook takes e4, and okay, the game was prolonged for some 4 more moves. I hope you realize, of course, this is completely winning, and here Leela C Zero really outplayed Stockfish with a great attack against this Benoni defense with really some great positional skills. I really like this game. This game, I think, had everything from this opening preparations, middle game strategies, from this finding the targets in the position with some great tactics also. This really, I think, was so far the best game of this TCEC season 17. The other games, I think, that were won by Leela C Zero Stockfish were really these bad openings. They were a little bit prearranged. These bad openings were played, I think, and that's why I think This was the most natural of all of the games so far that has been played. I've also seen one game in which Leela C Zero has won the game against Stockfish in the French defense. You should also check it out. Basically, I'm following this TCEC season 17 on chessbomb.com. It's really a great chess website. It has also the current evaluations. It's really great to follow this very nice season on that site. So I'll show you the link to that site also in the description below, so you can check it out. And okay, we'll see what will happen in the continuation of this very nice tournament. I'm really enjoying this super battle between these two top engines. Meanwhile, you can watch my other commented chess games played by computers. Here is the link, and you can also watch my best chess games of all time if you want to see Garry Kasparov, Magnus Carlsen, Vasily Ivanchuk, and many of these masters playing their best chess games in history. And you can also subscribe to my channel if you like this content. Thanks you for watching, guys, and chess is the best, of course.